2021 has felt a bit weird in terms of games. I don't know if it's just me, but after the avalanche of big releases that 2020 had through the entire year, 2021 has felt more just like breathing room as I try to catch up on everything I missed that year. It's not that 2021 hasn't had noteworthy releases, it's had plenty of great titles, both big and small, like Resident Evil 8, Little Nightmares 2, Buddy Simulator, and plenty of games to look forward to coming up. But it just hasn't felt as absolutely jam-packed as 2020, where games were constantly competing for attention, smaller ones slipped through the cracks, and there was always some big news going on. 2021 has given games a lot more time to breathe and get their own time to shine in the spotlight. And yet, the classic loss in the shuffle still happens. The terrible fate for any good game of just being forgotten because other big titles or not enough people talking. But talking is all I do, so let's dig up one I didn't hear as much about as I think it deserves. Let's discuss the magnum opus of one of my new favorite studios. It Takes Two. It Takes Two is the newest game made by Joseph Fares and their team at Hazelight Studios. They've made a bit of a name for themselves, getting decent attention and love with their previous games of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, and the one I am familiar with and found them with, A Way Out. A Way Out is a game I loved to bits from watching it. It was the first game made by the actual studio, and the place where the signature gimmick of Fares games was formed. These are purely co-op experiences. This was the key to A Way Out being so special for those who found it. The game uses this to its full advantage to make engaging gameplay, and also tell a story that simply would not work in a single player experience. This unique style of game, combined with a very interesting speech at the Game Awards,
fuck the Oscars, you know?
led to the game getting a good amount of attention and love. It was praised for the surprisingly great writing of the characters, the fun variety in its gameplay, and how it managed to expand the idea of a co-op game into something greater. So, as the next game by this team was shown off, I was excited. Or well, that's what I would say if it got marketed well so I would know about it. That's not to say it got bad trailers. Far from it. The game had amazing trailers made for it that really show off the game well and could have gotten people hooked. It's just that it got the worst luck of not really being talked about, and then having its first trailer shown off at the mess that was the 2020 Game Awards. It got buried hard, and I didn't really hear anyone talk about it aside from how creepy the book looked. Which is a shame because personally if I heard that Hazelight had a new game coming out, that would be all they needed to convince me. But sadly, I didn't hear about the game till it came out, and that's when I finally learned it was made by the same team as A Way Out, and I absolutely had to play it. And let me tell you, it lived up to the hype. This game takes everything A Way Out wanted to do and improves upon it in nearly every way. The game follows Cody and May, a couple in a struggling marriage about to be divorced, as through some shenanigans they are turned into dolls. From this point on, they journey through weird environments in hopes to get their bodies back and to break the spell keeping them as dolls. The game is a departure from A Way Out, as the gameplay is more fleshed out, as this is a full-on 3D platformer. In terms of a platformer, it's pretty simplistic but stands out in the same way A Way Out did. Sheer variety of gameplay, and it is cranked up to 11 here. We'll discuss that in more detail later. Now, this game is amazing like I have already said, and so obviously I have to recommend playing it beforehand to get the freshest experience you can. But this game has a unique caveat that may keep some away from it. This is a purely co-op experience like A Way Out was. You need someone else for this game to work the best it can. The game does thankfully give the option to match up with someone random online who wants to play, but I cannot speak for how well the system works, and in my experience the game is much better with someone you know. So this is something that sadly may hold some back from playing the game, and it's something I needed to bring up as a warning before telling you to blindly pick it up. But if you got a buddy or you're a stranger online and they're still interested, let's dive into It Takes Two and how Hazelight crafted the greatest multiplayer experience I have ever played.
Good man. That will be our first topic. Aha! Now, do you give each other enough?
Let's start with what I was surprised to be the weakest part of the game, the story. Now that's not to say the story is bad, far from it as I will discuss here. It's just that the other elements of the game are just absolutely incredible and soar above the still great narrative. The reason why this is surprising for me is that this is a complete reversal from Hazelight's last game, A Way Out, where the story was the real heavy lifter for the game. It looked great and had fun gameplay, but the story was truly the main focus of it, which isn't too surprising due to Farr's past as a film director. But It Takes Two focuses much less on the story compared to A Way Out. The story of the game feels much less like playing through a cinematic story like A Way Out, but instead feels like excellent framing to allow for the wonderful environments and varied gameplay we go through in this game. But Far's and Hazelight still have their knack for storytelling, so of course the story it still has is absolutely wonderful. As I explained before, the story covers a surprisingly real and heavy topic, as it focuses on Cody and May. While they used to be a loving couple, their marriage has fallen apart and left their daughter Rose in the center of their divorce. But with the use of a strange book their daughter found, the two are turned into dolls and must figure out a way to become human again, sometimes with the aid or active murder attempts of the book in question, Dr. Hakim. This is the framing for the amazingly creative journey you go on, and man does it work well to allow for some out there and super fun scenarios. The game somehow mixes the very real and emotional story of Cody and May with some absolutely bonkers stuff and makes it work. You'll find yourself teaming up with squirrels to take out a wasp nest with military gear, traveling through the strange underground of Cody and May's home, traversing Rose's toy castle to assassinate the ruler, and so many other wacky scenes. And yet, through all of the insanity, we get to learn more about Cody and May as people, why their marriage has been falling apart, and the love they used to share for each other. It's a little cheesy with how they execute it, but it was surprisingly mature in regards to their relationship and their problems. Though in terms of cheesiness, Cody and May have so much of it. The writing for these two when they aren't being serious is so hammy, and I love it. They make for one of my new favorite duos in games, and their dynamics are so fun as you'll begin to realize both of them are kind of insane. Cody is an absolute idiot sometimes, no matter how much he tries to hide it. He's also a total dork and has a big heart to him. He's a loser, I absolutely love him. May is also super fun as the more brainy side of the two, with a lot of sass and sarcasm bouncing perfectly off of Cody's dimness. She's pretty confrontational and fiery, and I love her too. These two make for some really fun and hammy scenes with each other. The comedy of this game is spot on at times. It's not an absolute riot like some games, but it's always entertaining with the sheer insanity it has, and plenty of scenes got a good chuckle out of me. And somehow, despite all the zaniness, these two managed to sell their story perfectly in the more quiet scenes of the game. You really do get a feel for their relationship, and how strained it is as they bicker and fight about the smallest things. But you also see how much they really care for their daughter, and slowly you also see how they used to really be a power couple, how they used to have so much passion for each other, how they used to be so supportive. You see the remnants of something great as you go through the game, and slowly you begin to actually root for them to work together and rebuild what has been broken between them. This was a tough thing to get right. I usually groan a bit now when the media tries to sell the idea that divorce and bad relationships are the case of people just not trying hard enough, when things are so much more complicated than that. But It Takes Two gets it right. You really see that this is a case where they were something supportive and loving before they let it all fall apart around them. The game doesn't try to say that this is true for all relationships. In fact, I feel like it is trying to say that this is just true for Cody and May's story. It manages to feel believable that they can fix this and return to their old relationship. Perhaps not in a single wacky adventure, but eventually. And all of this free marriage counseling comes from both my favorite and most dreaded character ever, Dr. Hakim, or as me and my partner called them, the Book. I will say I am still not the biggest fan of the design, because it is my sleep paralysis demon, but it is something you can eventually grow to like, especially when he doesn't look like he's about to murder them. Jokes aside, Dr. Hakim is an interesting character. As he started as clearly a character you are not meant to find that enjoyable. He's annoying and overly eccentric, and the game knows this, with Cody and May constantly pointing out how much they do not like Hakim. Him showing up becomes a moment of pure dread, and I somehow mean this in a good way, you just have to trust me. In the first half, Hakim is the definition of a wonderful love-to-hate character, who is both terrifying and entertaining whenever they showed up. But in the second half, he really grows into a genuinely likable and fun character, as his murder to actual help ratio improves. It probably sounds stupid, but he really turns from a character you love to hate to one you actually find charming somehow. I honestly don't know how, as he doesn't change much, but his mannerisms and everything about Hakim just becomes something enjoyable in these parts. He's a really fun character to have around for your journey for many different reasons. I thought I would hate them, but I have come out loving Dr. Hakim just as I love every single character in this game. This game really is just an entertaining ride the whole way through, that also manages to work in a really human story between Cody and May. And yet somehow, this is still the weakest part for me. So let's discuss those stronger elements that this story allows for, starting with the incredible visuals and sound of this game.
Good, May. That will be our first topic. Aha! Now, do you give each other enough?
Let's get this out of the way. This game is absolutely gorgeous in my opinion. This game has a visual style, settings, and music that all make my jaw drop. Every last bit of it is so finely crafted with love and passion, and it pays off for one of the best visual and audio experiences I have played. But first, let's get into the very few negatives I have with this game's looks. I've mentioned him before, but Dr. Hakim's design is just... yeah. I really do understand what they were trying to go for with this design, and it almost works, but just the eyes and the mouth really shoot them down into the uncanny valley for most scenes. But it is something you can grow used to. And secondly, the humans in this game just don't look as good as everything else in my opinion. I honestly don't know why, but something about them just feels off, and they just don't mesh as well in my opinion. But they don't show up much at all, so it really is no big deal. Now, with those negatives out of the way, oh my god, this game is beautiful. It feels a little weird to say, but this is definitely my favorite looking next-gen game for so many reasons. It Takes Two seems like it was able to get good funding from EA, just like A Way Out did, and how polished the game looks. It has all the works of a game up to modern standards. Detailed textures and modeling, detailed lighting, really great animation, everything you'd expect from a good AAA release. But this game's visuals stand out amongst the other big AAA games on modern hardware due to the factor it uses best: creativity. It takes the power that a big budget allows, but combines it with the level of love and care that you mostly see from indies. Fars and his team's love for their product shows, as these environments have so much detail put into them, not to mention the design of these worlds themselves. The use of bright, vibrant colors, wonderful lighting, and the great environment design with so many set pieces makes it so memorable and eye-catching, To put it simply, the high polish and this indie-like creativity is the magic combination that leads to it looking so wonderful and unlike anything else. But let's dive a bit deeper with that world design, because when I say they got creative with these worlds, I mean they went completely insane. The worlds you travel through in this game are one of a kind. Some are really interesting with the transition from the normal world you start in to a more weird and wild side, as reality is just thrown out the window in favor of fun. The other levels just throw it away completely while still keeping this interesting framing of technically being in the real world, but just with so much magic and nonsense that you might as well be in Narnia or something. No two locations feel the same. From the very grounded but still wonderfully designed places like the garden or the shed, to the technically real and endlessly creative with how they shift these real things into the fantastical, such as the attic or the snow globe, and those moments when the game says frick the real world and does what it wants with the space level and the underground. I really can't describe the magic of it in words like this, so just, God, look at this footage. And all of this is supported by a big surprise with the game's score. I usually come into bigger releases like this not expecting a super great score. They're usually good, but unless it's Nintendo or select games, the music often doesn't do too much for me. But It Takes Two basically saw that notion and then slapped me with a really amazing score that I didn't notice while playing, but God is it great to listen to. Gustav Grefberg and Christopher Ng did an outstanding job with this OST, and it stands out for the same reason the visuals do: creativity and variety. The game goes for so many different kinds of music, from the chill and calming, to electronic, to a grand sweeping orchestra feel. It does all sort of have a bass sound to a lot of the music, but it all feels so different from each other, and it's all lovely, especially in the second half. The music isn't super catchy like some OSTs I adore, but it is one I will always be happy to return to if I see it anywhere or need some background music, especially the songs from the disco section. Love these absolute bangers. But a game isn't a game with visuals and story alone, so let's talk about the amazing gameplay this game brings to the table.
That will be our first topic. Aha! Now, do you give each other enough?
Let's get into the thing that separates It Takes Two from just a great game to easily a new favorite of mine: the absolutely bonkers gameplay it provides. This is honestly something that I would not have expected from the makers of A Way Out. A Way Out's gameplay was fun enough for two people, but much more basic. Not exactly a selling point of the game, or something I would jump to play without the co-op aspect and story. It felt to me like the team was much more adept at crafting stories and visual sequences, which is why It Takes Two blows my mind so much. This is one of the most pure fun games I have played in a long time, and it is for the exact same reason that makes everything else I have discussed so far also stand out: pure variety. Forrest has stated in several interviews that he feels some games use a single mechanic for way too long, and thus the game becomes boring as a result. It Takes Two takes this philosophy and just starts running with it, as the thing with It Takes Two that is so special is that it never stops changing. It never becomes stale or static. Just as one mechanic may start to grow old, they completely flip the script and change it up. This is a very effective idea for the kind of experience Hazelight wants to make, because let me tell you, there was not a moment I was bored with this game. They never try to pull the same trick twice, and it forces them to think and create these unique moments that have so much more impact due to how they are truly one of a kind in this game. Farr said he wanted to keep more people engaged so they would actually finish the experience, and oh boy did they accomplish it with this amazing variety. It's hard to not want to keep playing just to see the next ability or setting or whatever else they try to throw at you. And despite throwing so much at the wall, It all sticks somehow. It Takes Two just feels so nice with its gameplay. The basic controls are standard 3D platformer stuff. Run, jump, double jump, and a dash. These are fine enough on their own and probably what some other games would just stick with to craft a whole experience with decent enough level design. But It Takes Two goes one step further. Past the first era, you will always have some new gimmick or gameplay mechanic to play around with. Whether it be as simple as grind rails and some swinging, or completely changing up the game like making it a third-person shooter, or literally just a hack and slash. Every single one is somehow polished so well. Every mechanic gets its time to shine and is pushed to its absolute limit. Not to mention how each one is just so fun to use in terms of how they can switch up the controls and gameplay. Some of these are things you could make an entire game out of and make it work. But Hazelight instead says, no, we've done the best we can with it. Have even more fun mechanics to keep it fresh. And just, God, it makes for such a fun time. But one thing the abilities do perfectly is co-op potential. Every ability is made with co-op in mind, and most will usually have interaction with the other player or their ability. This design also applies for levels as well, obviously. And while it's obviously something they needed to do to make it good, it's just something some co-op misses. It never feels like you're both going through the same area and just happen to be side by side. No, you are constantly interacting and having to work together to progress. The game takes notes from amazing co-op level designs such as Portal 2 and other such games. You have to actually communicate with who you're playing with, and that just always makes it a very special experience. And as one final extra point, I want to talk about something small but very fun they pull from A Way Out. Mini-games. Scattered through the journey, you can find small spots where the two of you can take a moment and play a minigame together, possibly with the same mechanic or wholly unique ones for each character. The same appeal of variety applies here too, as you have a simple target shooting game, actual arcade games against each other, sports, and literal chess. You can play a full game of chess in this game, and I love it. These are absolutely not necessary additions, but they add so much fun to the experience and are great for the co-op and bonding with your pal. I wish I could say more, but it's really just something you have to play to experience the true magic of. The wild ride it takes you on with every single mechanic it brings in. It's a game that kept blowing my mind and guessing what they would try to do next. It's just awe-inspiring how much they tried to pull off and how they managed to actually make it work so well. Seriously, just play the game and have fun with it. I cannot describe how much I enjoyed the gameplay and gimmicks here. But, let's wrap this up as usual.
Me. That will be our first topic. Aha! Now, do you give each other enough?
It Takes Two is a one-of-a-kind game. There's not really another game like it that uses co-op in such a unique and varied way like this. No other game that throws in this many mechanics. No other game that can craft the experience It Takes Two gives. The game is doing somewhat well with reviewers and in terms of overall sales, but man, I just feel like it isn't getting what it deserves. No one's really talking about this game much, and it seems to have somehow been lost in the shuffle, at least in my circles. It just sort of came out for most people, and they may not know really what it is or how great it is. This is a game that deserves to be talked about and discussed more. Hopefully this video can make at least a few people talk more about it. This may be Hazelight and Far's magnum opus. It takes the groundwork they laid with A Way Out and somehow improves upon every single aspect of the game. From a wonderful story and characters, to stunning visuals and music, and the most fun and varied co-op gameplay I've seen. This game pulls off everything perfectly. Until I see how Psychonauts 2 turns out, this is easily my pick for Game of the Year. Though Fars and the studio are not done at all yet, so they may improve upon even this. Hazelight and Fars are a beacon of true passion in the AAA space, and a real breath of fresh air. I cannot wait to see what they do next. And this time, it better be shouted to the skies when it comes out and is another banger of a game. But, that's all for now. See you all in the next video, wherever that takes us.